works on my machine. Most likely it's because you introduced a bug. So programming is, it depends on the flavor of programming you're doing. If you're doing rendering programming, it's a lot about math. And especially in the last 10 years, I was a render programmer 7 years ago, and the technology has gone through 2 or 3 different evolutions that I even feel uncomfortable in that realm right now. I would have to go and do a bunch of research. Rendering is a very specialized bunch of folks who all they care about is graphics. They care about lighting and shadows and all this stuff. But most programming is about logic. Is about, okay, if they do this, that means this happens. Otherwise, if this happens, then I'm going to do this. So it's these if-else statements all over the place. I would say the best thing, the best things I would say for programming is Sudoku. Anyone done Sudoku? Yeah. So Sudoku teaches you logic problems of, okay, if there's a 5 in this column and a 5 in this column, it means there must be a 5 up in these 3, and if, oh, now I get it. And all of a sudden you're seeing these sort of correlations between things you aren't trained on yet. Any sort of logic problems, any way you can train your brain to do logic, that's how the computer thinks. Again, if you want to learn programming languages, make a silly hello world program that prints out a string. And then based on user input, if they hit a 1 or a 2, it prints out 2 different strings. And then after it prints out 2 different strings, make it a card game that all of a sudden you're saying, you know, I'm sorry if I'm advocating for, I'm not really, you don't gamble, but if you're doing blackjack, you're saying, you know, I'll take a hit and it went over 20, or, you know, you start doing simple blackjack where you go, all right, I'm going to stay, and then I win against the house. Okay, that's cool. And then when you get, I think when it splits, when you get 2 of the same card, you can split them and have 2 hands. Okay, well that's your first patch. That's version 1.5, where you're adding some new features to your game. But start small and pick a language. A lot of people use C#. If you're using our engine is the Unreal Engine, so we're all C++ all the time. Unity uses C#, which is a little bit friendlier for new programmers. There's some other, I guess, high-level programming languages. I don't know what. Are you guys writing? You're using a tool set, so there's no actual language. Got it. And then our engine also has something called Blueprints on top of it, which is a visual scripting language, which is actually really cool, and it's kind of, it feels like Voodoo. Even as a programmer, it feels like Voodoo. I get that we've built these layers on top of each other, but Blueprints are a way that you can say, hey, I have this array of things, and for each one of those things, I want to do this one action, and magic happens. So the other thing to realize is that in programming, it's built in layers. So you have some really low-level layers that are like, read a file in, do some math, like add 2 numbers together, write out a file to disk, get some user input, really low-level stuff. On top of that, you go, okay, well, I got all this low-level stuff, and now I need arrays. I need a list of things. I need a list of widgets. But sometimes a list isn't the right structure. Sometimes you want a tree. Sometimes you want a linked list. Sometimes you want different formats of this data. And then on top of that, you build, hey, I got these game elements. I got projectiles that can shoot. I got physics. I have meshes that can draw. I have rendering. And then you start building your game on top of that. So that stratification is really important.
It's magic. It's magic.
It is, yeah. A lot of programming eventually feels like Voodoo. What's the quote? It's like something about when technology gets so advanced, it is almost indecipherable from magic. And that's how a lot of games feel. Like when I see the stuff that I know the tool set our designers have to work with, and the stuff that comes out of that is amazing. When I was a render programmer, I would work on particle systems. Like, hey, how do you make cool looking smoke? By the way, as a programmer, games are the coolest and best version, the most creative version of a technical discipline that you'll find. How do you make cool smoke? I don't know, probably a really awesome problem to solve. How do you make cool looking fire? How do you make fire, like smoke that looks like it has fire inside it? How do you make a ray gun that looks like it's shooting this thing, and how do you make that thing disintegrate? These are really cool problems, and they're really fun to work on. And I would always have artists go, hey man, so I want to have my particles, as they shoot out this way, I want to have the particle, rather than being like facing the camera all the time, I want to have it face the direction. So like, if you're shooting like a ray gun, it's these little concentric rings that come out, right? So I was like, you're not going to use that. Where are you going to use that? What are you going to do that's cool with that? And they go, oh no, this will be great. Because my imagination could not visualize what they were going to do with this tool set. and you make this tool set, and the artists lose their mind, and they're like, oh, I can do this, and artists find ways of making awesome with the tools that they're given. So if you're an artist, you can probably work in almost any medium. You can work in Photoshop, you can work in Illustrator, you can work in 3D Studio Max, 3D, 2D, it doesn't actually matter. It just matters that you do something.
Any other questions or things you want to talk about?
On Khan Academy, I'm learning coding.
What language are you coding in?
We're just like typing in. It's teaching you how to like make shapes, different shapes by turning in different numbers.
But what does that look like? Does it just have like is it like a form you fill out? JavaScript. Okay. JavaScript's a great language to start practicing in. It's interesting because there are sort of, I'm going to give you my feeling on this. Take it with a grain of salt. This is, again, my very jaded C++ programmer opinion. I find that it is easier to go from a very restrictive language like C++, where you have to know everything about how to use memory, and you have to know everything about how pointers work and how computers work, and you have to have some really deep knowledge. And from that point, it's really easy to work towards a more relaxed language. It is a trap that I find a lot of web developers fall into, is that they get enough skills under their belt that they stop and they get complacent. And when a C++ programmer, again, because C++ programmers are the deal, when we look at their code, we're like, man, you're sloppy and your variables are named terribly, and I basically can't look at the code until I go and refactor it. And only by making it look pretty and nice can I understand what in the world they were trying to do. Now, most of that code is written by left brain, right brain folks that the only reason they're programming is because they want their art to be seen. So it is only a means to an end, but as programmers, that's our art, right? That's how we make awesome. So JavaScript flies a little looser, because they're usually like, I'm making a variable, it's called I. Is it an integer? Is it a floating point number? Is it a widget? Like, what in the world is that? And they allow for bad habits to accrue. So it's a great language to start in. Just be careful. Anybody else? Sir.
Like, what do you guys do besides program games?
Like outside of work or in work?
Like in work.
Okay. Well, in a former life, I did a lot of people management, so dealing with people problems. Like, our industry is an art form industry, and there are a lot of people who have a lot of passion. With a lot of passion come a lot of, well, why didn't you think my thing was the awesomest thing? It's obviously the coolest thing on the world. You just don't understand how awesome I am, right? There are a lot of personalities at play, and that's true anywhere you work. It's not unique to the games industry. So dealing with the people problems was one. Planning. Games, it is very bad to just kind of like, hey, let's make a game, man. And you just start typing and you see if something comes together, you have to plan, hey, we have to make 20 characters. In order to make 20 characters, we need this many modelers, we need this many animators, we need this many texture designers, and it's going to take this amount of time. In order to get 20 characters, man, that's going to take us 14 months. If you don't start now, you're going to miss your deadline. So there's a lot of planning. And there are a lot of moving parts to games. You know, analytics sort of comes in towards the tail once we have a product, but there's the code, there's the tools we use to make all the content, there is all the art assets, there's all the rules that we use to make these games. So tying those together, there are a lot of moving parts. Games, when you're writing a book, if you're a good writer, you can do it on your own. If you're an artist, you can make a painting. You can do that on your own. Games are a mixed discipline. Art, design, gotta find the fun, programming. Takes a village. It's crazy. Somebody else?
Can you talk about you mentioned earlier, Darren, about the Asian market, how they form differently or choose different things. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And this kind of goes into our friend Lowell's thing that we were talking about. So Lowell understands all of the markets of games, and it turns out every culture plays games differently. Some of it is how they play, like the type of games that they play. You'll find like League of Legends, for instance, is the largest game in the world. It's primarily in Asia, though. It's okay in North America. It does really good in South America. There's a game called World of Tanks that turns out is huge in Russia. All the Russians play it. So games tend to be very localized in where they hit it big effectively. Some of it is cultural, like in China, a lot of people don't have internet connections in their home, so they tend to play more social games where there's large groups of people because they play in cafes with each other. Whereas in North America, there tends to be a lot more, I guess, less social gaming and more single-player games, things like that, because a lot of times we're playing by ourselves from home anyway. That's starting to kind of go away as internet connections are better and better, and now you can do massive multiplayer games that you couldn't have done 5 years ago because the connections are just that much stronger and you get that much more bandwidth through. There's also cultural differences in how you can present things. For instance, in China, you can't show bones. Like that's just a rule China has. You can't show bones. So any of your artwork, when you're planning things out, like if we're planning to go to China, we're doing artwork, we know that's a thing. We can't have any characters show bones.
My favorite one from the China list, we had this giant document of all the things we could not do in China, and one of them was, besides bones was a great one, my favorite was things that are heavily porous, so things that look like coral or have lots of holes in them freak out the Chinese populace, and you can, like, they basically will make you change your artwork to ship in China.
Wow.
Crazy.
So do you take that into consideration when you're creating games, or is that not your like cultural things? Are you just making a game and hoping somebody plays it, or are you targeting a certain area?
I think you need to be mindful of it. Like in Germany, based on everything that happened in World War II, Germany has a bunch of weird shenanigans going on with them. One of their things is no blood. No blood in games, no red blood. Green blood's okay.
Oh, God.
Wow.
So game developers, in order to be allowed to ship in Germany and have your game playable in Germany, you must change, or at least have the option where if you're playing in Germany, blood's green. So it's important to know who you're shipping towards, but you could always say, look man, making the game for the USA. We're gonna have bones in our game. That's gonna be awesome. That's fine. It just means your audience is smaller.
It probably depends on the scale of your company too. If you're just making an indie game that you're going to put on Steam, you probably don't care about this sort of thing. If you're a 500-person company where we know our games are going to be global, then it's something we have to consider when we're designing art.
Yes.
So back to the bones thing. Are
Yeah.
they scared of SpongeBob? No, that's the whole thing.
Oh, the porous thing? I don't know. I just know that they showed some images and they had, someone that had, pock marks on their face or whatever, and it freaked them out.
Any last minute questions?
Okay.
Real fast, yeah.
I've lived in Turkey for 8 years.
Yeah.
And like they play World of Tanks. Like some of my friends play Minecraft too.
Yeah.
And like some games I've never heard of that are really famous there.
So I was gonna draw something that we're talking about internally.
Oh,
Okay.
hold on for
Sure.
here. Yeah.
It'll just take 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So, can you right here?
Yep.
That's fine. So, in one of our games, we're talking about this a lot, and that we have. We talk about games, and there are there are sort of 3 essentially archetypes of players. There's the mind player. This is the person who loves chess. They love strategy. This person they hate getting beaten by Twitch players. Someone who, they do all the planning, they set all the traps, and someone who can just acquire them and headshot is the worst thing because they've done all that work, and it's so frustrating. The reflex player, they're fast. It's you guys are the reflex players, I'm sure. I probably at one point in my life was a reflex player, not anymore. Reflex players like to be the best because they are physically the most adept. They can click the fastest. They have, what is it called? Basically, they have a metric in StarCraft. It's like clicks per minute. And you have the support player, and that they want to help. They just want to help their friends. They just want to show up, and they just want to not drag the team down. They want to be a healer. They want to provide ammo to everybody. They just want to have fun, and they don't want to be the guy who makes their team lose. That's their biggest fear, is they want to come in, and they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to get this guy sniping them in the head every 2 seconds. It's devastating. So different games like Call of Duty and probably Halo over here, World of Tanks over here, chess up here. You want to have a hit, you target these people. little bit of something for everybody, or you target